With all the changes to skill gems in Path of Exile Affliction League, it's easy to forget that we're also getting some new uniques, especially because some of them are a little bit underwhelming. But I wanted to start with one that's a little bit more exciting to me. This is a new unique item that's available from the returning ultimatum mechanic. There's actually two, but one of them isn't very good for reasons that I'll talk about later. The one that I'm excited about is Ixchel's Temptation, which I've probably mispronounced, and feel free to correct me down below. Also, while you're down there, maybe get subscribed if you're enjoying the content and leave a like. But anyway, back to the ring that has all of the stats. At first glance, it's just a random assortment of stat garbage. I mean, all attributes, cast damage to attacks, fire damage to spells. Wait, what are you doing? That's attacks and spells. Global crit multi? That's weird. Pretty powerful, but kind of weird. Armor, evasion, energy shield, it's got all the defenses, life and mana, because you've got to have both. Elemental resistances, attack and cast speed, oh wait. Maximum quality is 200%. And this is where the ring suddenly gets very interesting, because you can catalyze it with the new catalysts. These give a random amount of a random quality. And all of a sudden, this ring starts to look a little bit less like a collection of random garbage and a little bit more like Ventor's Ultimate Gamble Valorb Edition, where you can get up to 200% increases on any of those stats. Now, some of them will be grouped together and increased, others won't. For example, if you use a prismatic catalyst, the ring goes from 10% all the way up to, in theory, 30% to all elemental resistances. It can gain up to about 70 life, assuming that's 20 to 30, maybe even up to 90. But here's the problem. A random catalyst of a random amount. So you're just as likely to roll 1% to chaos modifiers as you are 200% to critical modifiers. And by the way, let's assume that 17% to global crit multi is actually the top end of a roll. Well, with a catalyst, that's 51%. And 51% crit multi is more than you get from a good synthesized base that you rolled with Essence of Scorn to make a double crit multi ring. Now, are all of the other stats on the ring more useful than what that item would be? No. But there's damage to attacks or damage to spells. There's some defenses. There's life. There's res. There's even speed. All the stats on the ring are relatively useful in isolation, just not in amount. So if it had 51% crit multi, yeah, I'd probably be wearing it. But that said, are the odds in your favor of ever getting that 51% crit multi ring? No, absolutely not. And people are definitely going to be gambling away plenty of catalysts. The other ultimatum unique is a lot more boring. Gamblesprint. When hit, gain a random move speed modifier from 40% reduced to 100% increased until hit again. So if you get hit, go to 100% increased and never get hit again, awesome. But what happens if you get hit once, and because your build's super evadey and made to be unhittable, you're stuck at negative 40? Well, all of a sudden, those boots suck a lot. Also, their stats are kind of bad. So yeah, I don't think anyone should be wearing Gamblesprint, but hey, you might be tempted to waste some of your catalysts. But these uniques aren't the only ones coming in Path of Exile 323. We've also seen 3 brand new unique items, all of which are coming from the Affliction League mechanic. First is Pragmatism, which seems to be a Magi-focused item, since Magi like to have empty sockets on their gear. And I even like how that's explained within the flavor text. The Magi were forbidden from touching virtue gems. So I'm not 100% on the lore here, but I think the virtue gems might be support gems. It's support gem, skill gem, something. And then it continues on, so their practical warriors employed geomancy instead. In other words, you just leave all your sockets open and somehow hit someone way harder than if you had support gems in your socket. Kind of, sort of. This gives plus 12 to level of socketed skill gems, which in most cases is not going to outweigh a bunch of supports. But if somehow you're a Plague Bearer build, and all you care about is Plague Bearer, that's a hell of a lot of scaling, especially now. Especially because you could give it plus 10 levels, stick an enhance in the other socket, corrupt the thing, and have, I don't know, 1,000,000 plague DPS per second potentially? Turn yourself into the ultimate walking simulator? In short, there's some absolutely crazy, ridiculous stuff here. But how does it work? plus 12 to level of socketed skill gems. So you socket a skill gem in, it gains plus 12 levels. Then it has some armor and max mana. Those stats aren't that interesting, but it is notable that it doesn't have any life, enabling the 15% mastery. Then minus 2 to level of socketed skill gems per socketed gem. So if you just socket in one skill, plus 10 total. If you socket in one skill and 5 supports, plus 0 total. Your chest now reads 100% increased armor, 84 to max mana, and you are sad. I personally can't really think of any uses for Pragmatism, but if you're a pragmatic exile, let me know down below what your thoughts are. And similarly, the Trickster's smile is interesting in theory and probably terrible in practice. So armor and evasion, cool. Reflecting damage, that's not going to do much. But then when an enemy hit deals elemental damage to you, their resistance to those elements becomes 0 for 4 seconds. If you're a Fizz build, this item doesn't help you. If you're a Chaos build, this item doesn't help you. So okay, you're a lightning damage build, and you want to negate enemy resistances. Now you need a specific way that guarantees all enemies are dealing lightning or fire to you or cold to you, i.e. you are converting their damage. Which, yes, there are uniques like Pyroshock Clasp that do that. However, now, to negate enemy resistances, instead of using 2 curses, you are giving up your helmet and giving up your belt slot. In exchange, you are gaining some defenses, but if an enemy ever hits you and doesn't do this, like let's just say they convert all of their damage to chaos naturally, or maybe they don't deal base fizz damage because they're a pure fire build, but you're a lightning build, so you need them to deal lightning damage. Well, that gets even harder. This item seems way more trouble than it's worth. Now, maybe there's a use that I'm not thinking of, but it gets even more problematic because now the enemy's resistance is 0. So obviously you're not using curses that interact with enemy resistances, which means you get screwed over the minute they don't deal that element to you. Or alternatively, you run the elemental curses, in which case if you're using penetration and Ellie curses, then once it becomes 0, you're actually losing damage from other investment. So I don't think Trickster Smile is going to see much use outside of meme videos, but hey, if you have a really good idea, let me know down below. And last up, an item that I'm actually kind of excited for, the Untouched Soul. This gives plus 40 to maximum life for each empty red socket on any equipped item, 225 to accuracy rating for each empty green socket on any equipped item, 40 to maximum mana for each empty blue socket, and 18% to all elemental resistances for each empty white socket. Now, if only there was a class that got a bunch of bonuses, like 50% to all elemental resistance, if you have no gem socketed in your helmet. If you have a helmet with 4 white sockets and no gems, you can get around 122% total elemental resistances, which is almost enough to cap you with no res on gear, leading to some very interesting possibilities where you replace that with attributes or damage suffixes. Alternatively, you could put 4 red sockets in and have a helmet, pretty much cap out your resistances, get 80 life. Or on your gloves, get 25% increased life and 160 flat, which is also really good. But it's probably a little bit too all in to have a helmet that's completely empty of sockets. So instead, you're probably going to have no skill gems in your helmet, and instead get an abyssal socket and put in an abyssal jewel. If your helmet is maybe red, white with an abyssal socket, you're getting all the stats from an abyssal jewel, which is already pretty darn competitive, and you're getting 80 flat life, and you're getting 18% elemental resistances. You're basically getting 2 free affixes on your item for leaving the sockets empty. In some builds, there are 2 sockets starved for this. Minion players are probably looking at this going, are you insane? I'm never going to be able to use this. But then other builds are saying, hey, yeah, especially if equality changes, I don't need that. I'm not using an alt quality gem for utility anymore. Or maybe you don't need to life tap something because you just went with a blood magic stuff. Well, that's where things get really, really interesting. And I think there's going to be a lot of cool character building options with the Untouched Soul, especially if we've got a couple more items that interact this way. Passive skill tattoos interacted with attributes in an interesting way, and now affliction stuff interacts with gem sockets in a similarly interesting manner that's going to have a huge effect on character building. And so I very much look forward to people's creations as the league goes on. But those are my thoughts on the 5 unique items that we've seen so far. With that said, do be sure to stay tuned because as more unique items are revealed, I'm going to give my thoughts on either some use cases or potentially even builds they're used for, if it seems like the sort of item that just goes into one build. The reason I wasn't mentioning specific builds here is everything is pretty darn generic. I mean, crit multi works on any build that crits. And the Untouched Soul gives stuff for life, mana accuracy, Elirez. Yeah, there's something for attackers. There's something for Mind Over Matter Archmage people. Not that anyone's really playing that. Hey, shout out in the comments down below to everyone still playing Archmage. And there's even stuff for people who want to min-max and cap their resistances as easily as possible. And if you want to know more about some quality uniques that I recommend, I'll link to a video up in the card or down below, along with my recommendations for some skill gems and what to quality up. And if you're wondering about these new ascendancies, yes, I have a video on that as well. You can find all the resources up in the card and down below, along with a link to Maxwell GG, where I'm talking about some of his stuff in a little bit more detail because that's easier in the written format. With that said, thanks for watching, and a special thanks to my patrons and channel members for their continued support. If you want to see your name in the credits of all these videos, then for about $5 a month, you can become a patron and help to directly support the channel. Link to that is also down below. Now, with that said, thank you again for watching. I really do hope that I can make some builds with the Untouched Soul and not feel bad about it. I don't know, with 50% from leaving the helmet open, there's got to be something there, and I know the amulet is a big ask, so it's probably not going to be a spellcaster build, but there's plenty of attack builds out there that don't need their amulet all that much, despite it being a relatively powerful slot. I'm tempted to say I'd even throw in the ultimatum ring, but that would truly be too greedy. And so for now, I'll leave it all to the land of speculation and theorycraft, and hopefully see you again sometime soon.